Can you guys hear me? Okay, yes. All right. So the purpose of this panel was really to highlight what Cindy just talked about, which is that it's not always huge, enormous, sweeping changes that are needed. Sometimes it's micro actions. And everyone on this panel I either met because they reached out and shared that something happened at last year's event, or we connected over the common ground of 3%. So everyone here has become a change agent in some way, and we're here to hear what they have to say to inspire you to think how you can be sitting up here next year. So why don't we start with Ignacio? Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about your background and the Art Directors Club and how long you've been there?
Sure. The Art Directors Club is the first advertising award show and design show in the world. It's 0.0 for our industry. It's the first time we got organized and sort of, created something together. And it's 93 years old. I've been working with most award shows for a very long time, and I used to be an art director. And I don't know if you noticed, but most award show judgings, it's just a bunch of guys. It's 9 to 1, 8 to 2, 10 to 0. And I came on board to run ADC about a year and a half ago. And I really believe that if an award show doesn't have a purpose in our industry, it should not exist. And we did our festival in Miami Beach, and 3-day festival. And Cindy was actually our MC, and she was always mentioning how, I wish there were more women coming up to pick up awards, and I wish there were more women speaking, And I actually just started thinking, why isn't there more women at the top of the agencies? And it just clicked, in my brain. Try to follow me. And I explain this all the time to everybody, because I think we just have not admitted it. You see, award shows pick people to judge the shows that have judged other shows, for the most part. I can't generalize for everybody, but you notice that the people that are judging sort of have judged all the shows, and they're sort of like the same group. And as a result of that becomes sort of the cyclical pot. Now, when it's time for an agency to hire a new creative director. Let's get into practicality of it. If you're the CEO of an agency and you need to find a new creative director, you're not just finding a good creative director, you're finding a creative director that has done a lot of shows, that has spoken at a lot of events, and has a big public persona, because the creative director is the hero of the agency. So, if we put more women up in the spotlight, meaning speaking at more events and judging the shows, next time it's time to pick another woman to run a new agency for BBH or TBWA or BBDO or whichever one, the pile of selection of women will be bigger to choose from. And then there will not be a need for anything like the 50-50 initiative or the 3% conference, because we will be balanced, and that's the point, that you just need to do a manual correction. So what we did is that we started an initiative called the 50-50 initiative. I just got pissed off one Friday. I said, I can't stand our industry talking about this topic. I find that, do we really need to talk about how women are important in our industry? Shouldn't it be obvious? Is our culture that low as a society that we need to debate it or argument it or even get numbers for it? And so we just decided to do it, and I was going to do a photo shoot by next Monday. I called every award show in the world, and I said, we got to do it together. And the Clios joined, the Andy Awards, which are here, they got their board 50-50, so they joined, the 4As joined. I'm speaking to DNAD on Wednesday. Can't say they would consider it. I think one show said no. Wow. This week, I convinced all the shows, basically in Canada, 95% of them to join. And that's it. In 1 week, boom. We took a photo, we did it, it's done. So that's the point, and I think it goes back to sort of what Cindy's point is, that you can talk a lot about it, but our actions are a lot stronger. And I think, just to finish off, I think everybody thinks that that the rules of the industry are decided by some unknown entity, Martin Sorrell or David Ogilvy's ghost, and you're all gonna get an email tomorrow saying, okay guys, it's all changed. Now our agencies are going to be 50-50 and we're going to... No, it's not. Like, it's just you and me. 10 years ago, I was an unemployed junior at Ogilvy, and now I'm here, and I don't think you need anyone's permission to change things. And at the end of the day, we'll all make more money, we'll be more successful. I think there's two ladies here later today, that Janet and Nancy, they were my first bosses at Ogilvy, and they're the reason why I'm here. So I know that the more women I work with, the more women I hire, the more women I work for, the more successful I am. And that's just a fact, and it's very simple. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. I want to say something, and Nancy Hill from the 4As said something that I've re-quoted many, many times, which is, women are the last to commit and the first to cancel.
Yep.
And so I have a lot of sympathy, although I don't excuse it, for award shows that have difficulty. And a lot of them say, we tried to find women, and women wouldn't make themselves available.
Yeah.
So one of the 50 things your agency can do right now is, if you have a female creative director, if you are a female creative director, pledge to judge an award show this year. I did 2 of them this last year. And yes, it's time consuming. But like Cindy said, you can't complain if there are no women on the board of Twitter and then not send that email. So you can't complain that there aren't women judging these award shows if you don't make yourself available. So we even have in your program a list of all the award shows and what the criteria is to be eligible. Some of them you can judge from home, some of the digital work. So please, female creative directors, 1 show this year. All right, let's move on to Heidi. Heidi is the head of HR at 11, who has been an incredible supporter of this movement. And I want you to share, what I love about what Heidi did is she thought about a way, a lot of this is about the juniors in our field and grooming them. And she thought a lot about the women that have the mass exodus. How can we get them back? So can you share with us what your thoughts were?
Yes. I'm really excited about this initiative. 11 is in partnership now with the Miami Ad School, and together we're creating a reentry program for female creatives who've been out of the workforce for significant periods of time. So I would say, 2, 3, 4, 5+ years.
Yep. And some of the reasons why women feel that they can't come back into the industry, can you talk a little? Because I know that kind of inspired you to think about how you would coach them.
Yes. So it's, in my experience, I've seen a lot of women go out and come back and they're unfazed and it's fine. I've seen other groups go out with every intention of returning back to agency life, and yet when that time hits them, they recognize that their portfolio isn't as fresh. They aren't as confident as they once were. Their work doesn't feel as relevant. And I think at that point, a lot of women opt out and we lose them.
Yeah.
And so the thinking was, what could we do in order to not lose this population? And so we thought, let's put together a crash course or a boot camp-like program that could help get this category of women very quickly up to speed and ready to re-enter the agency world.
Perfect. And for any of us out there that are creative directors, I really believe that if you are a skilled problem solver and a creative thinker, that doesn't lose relevance.
Right.
Yes, you might not understand social media. Yes, you might not have a digital portfolio. That is Mickey Mouse. Like, you have the problem solving skills. And what I love about what Heidi did is that rather than trying, again, to groom people into creative director positions, which we do need to do, there's a whole group of women out there, untapped talent, that isn't being utilized in our industry. So I feel like it could impact the 3% number quickly.
Hopefully.
Immediately. So anyway, we're excited about that, and I know you'll share news about once it's up and running, which we will share through our Facebook community for people that want to get involved.
For sure.
Awesome. Okay, now we're going to move on to Debbie. You are the Chief Creative Officer at VML.
Yep.
And what I love about this story is I had never met you.
Yep.
You came to last year's event. I don't know how you heard about it, but you sent me an email afterwards and talked about how on the plane ride home from this conference, 3 people from her agency all took on points about how they were going to address it. So tell us about those 3 points.
Okay, so I came actually with just one other coworker last year and was inspired by the movement. And being a chief creative officer and being female, definitely felt like I had a role to play. I think when Cindy just said promote yourself, that wasn't something that, that I was doing either. But we also have a chief strategy officer that is female and a CMO that is female. And so I was emailing them with Wi-Fi, right, about we need to meet and talk about things we can do in the industry, and also just at our agency. And I hate to call it the 3 M's, but this is how it started. we looked at losing the staff that we're talking about. We have no problem finding young talent that is female, but we lose the female staff, right? And so we looked at what we were doing right now with maternity, which really became a much bigger deal with parental leave and adoption benefits and all kinds of things around moms and how to keep them in. If they go on maternity leave, how to get them back in, whether that means some go part-time, some change their schedule, some go to different client bases, like to help things. And that has actually worked for our men too. It's not just women who have like serious needs that might come at one point in their life to change their actual work hours and things like that. So we started working with that, even down to the simplest things as our offices that have parking put expecting moms parking in. I just saw one of our females who was very pregnant walking across this large parking lot, like the Lean-In book, and thought, you know, we don't have this, and it would be just a nice thing to have. So we changed a lot of things around that. The other one was millennials, and Cindy actually mentioned this too, which was, you better start talking to your millennials. 36% of our staff is in the millennial group. So I hate to say focus group, but we brought them in for lunch. We started talking to them about what was important to them, about how to change things at work. Continuing education is a very big deal to this group. So we've put in one MBA program where they can apply for an MBA with a connection with another university. I also found that with the creatives, they actually want to teach at a lot of our universities and areas. And so we're working out a team right now. Some do that in the evening, but we are trying to work out a program where some might be able to do that during the day. Because we think that helps keep people. So you have to look at a millennial as a whole and what other things are very important to them. Not just flexible hours, not just beer on tap, not any of the things you guys are thinking about. So we really are working with that group kind of ongoing. And then the last one was mentoring. And I did attend the breakout for mentoring with women. We kind of made this a bigger group because we don't want to just think about women, but it just seemed much easier for the men in our organization because there are a lot of male leaders, and it seemed a very natural thing with the guys at work. You know, CEOs who play basketball, things like that. So you could just get around a lot of the men easier. So we set up a mentoring system, I would say. I wouldn't say it's formal. We did a showing of misrepresentation for the whole agency. We set up a panel of the women executives at the office so they can just talk to us about things like how we got there, things we did. And you know, we figured out that even our styles of leadership are very different. So those are sort of the main things. I think we're a digital agency, if you can say that now. And I would say one of the things we figured out quickly was if you think it's bad in the creative field, you should start looking at the tech field. So we do have a leader here with us, a female in that group from tech, but they're at about 2%. So they really took this on as well, and they started Women in Technology in Kansas City to help girls learn how to code, lots of other things that we're doing. And I don't feel like we're done. I feel like we've just started the conversation. We have a very supportive CEO, but I feel like across all of our offices in the United States, we need to really do a better job, and we are global. So the thing about promoting, I did sit on 3 juries this year. I was asked to be the digital chair for the Lories in South Africa. It's the first international chair that they've had, they brought in. And it wasn't the problem of being the chair for it, it was speaking to 1,000 people. And that was part of it. And of course, it was ladies first. I got to go first on the male panel. So that was a little nerve-wracking, but you know, just stepping out there and doing that. And I had the platform in front of 1,000 people then to talk about diversity before I was finished, right? So not just diversity gender, but diversity in general in their entire creative teams who are very male, white dominated. So it went really well, lots of Twitter comments after that. So lots of comments about 3%. So that's what we're doing right now. And I think it was just as simple, let's just do this. So,
right.
Yeah.
And you know, I feel like we're so trained as an industry to meet with our clients and hear what their needs are and create a plan and deliverables and a schedule, and we don't do it for ourselves. And what I love about what you did is you got on that airplane, you harnessed the inspiration you had before you got sucked back into the vortex, and you assigned people things. And she's standing here today telling you guys that these 3 programs are underway. That's how it happens. Awesome. All right, we're going to go next to Ann Lehman. I always get confused about there's the status on the Department of Women. What is the official name?
The San Francisco Department on the Status of Women.
So San Francisco is the only city in the country that has a group at City Hall that basically looks after the economic well-being, especially in the workplace, of women in the Bay Area, which I think is so incredible. And Ann and I met, Lori McKenzie, who spoke last year from the Clayman Institute, connected us. And we went out to lunch with a lot of your colleagues. In fact, I remember the day we went to lunch, the day before you had Hillary Clinton to lunch. So I was feeling like, wow. But they basically were describing what they did and who they were and how much research they had worked on for so long around this issue. And I had this out-of-body experience, and I remember saying to you, you don't understand, I spend so much time in advertising, listen to clients talk about things that no one cares about, and trying to find the one thing people do care about, and yet here was this group doing this incredibly important work and being very quiet about it. And I was like, you guys need to crow a little louder. So we started working together, and last year, you guys put on a breakout session within the 3% conference. And then from that, you launched a Gender Equality Principles Challenge, which is fascinating and applies to a lot of you here. So listen up, especially if your PR people are always looking for ways for your agency to look like a star. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, well, first of all, I do work for government, and I want to welcome you all to San Francisco, and San Francisco is open for business.
Woo!
Is there anyone else here from government, just out of curiosity? Okay, so what we have done that I'll show you in just a minute is create a collaboration, one of the famous private sector government collaborations. I'm a bit of a policy wonk, and I've been working in this area for quite some time. San Francisco actually adopted a treaty, a women's treaty that our government has not yet adopted, but almost every other developed country in the world has, called CETA. And so my job has been to implement that. And part of the CETA statute here in San Francisco was take it to the private sector. And this is all about creating gender equality in the private sector. Did I do this? Is it?
Are the slides showing?
Yeah, is it up? Am I doing something wrong? It's up, okay. So we started something called the Gender Equality Principles Initiative. And what it is we created 7 different major principles of how a company, and Cindy talked a lot about this. I was really appreciative when she talked about this. This is what companies can do, not what individuals can do. So, we really wanted to see if you were going to create a fully fair and equitable workplace for women, what would it look like? So we have 7 principles that go across the entire spectrum. We have 100 best practices that you can take an assessment on to see if really your company is measuring up. And we put this all out there a few years ago, and guess what? Companies didn't come. We were shocked. We found out the lawyers got involved, and they didn't want them taking assessments, and they were worried about lawsuits. And so after last year's conference, we said we've got to do something different. And Kat actually helped us think up this Gender Equality Challenge. So what it is we ask companies, and you can see some of the companies that are there on our council, to basically share just one best model practice that creates gender equality in the workplace. And by doing that, I don't mean just share, like tell us your wonderful name of your program and give us 2 wonderful marketing sentences. I mean really share with details and quotes and metrics and tools so that others will be able to take that practice and implement it in their own company. So just quickly, this is the Gender Equality Principles website, and a little embarrassed to be showing this page right now because that's a stock photo. And even though San Francisco is funding us to do this, we do not have a lot of money. So anybody who wants to share any additional photos that they have, we would be happy to have them. And that's the website. It's genderprinciples.org. You can go there. You can look at the challenge. You can look at our assessments, and you can join with us. And I'd also be happy to share information about this afterwards. But we launched this in April at City Hall. And those are a number of board of supervisors that are there in that photograph. There's a representative from the mayor's office. And we launched this in April to, sadly, on the same day of the Boston massacre, and didn't get quite the press that we were hoping we would get. So we are one of those, sadly, best kept secrets, but hopefully all of you can help let people know what we're doing. So we launched it, and the very first practice we got was from a company called Symantec. Everybody here know what Symantec is? Norton Utilities? Well, unlike some things that you've heard in the press recently, Symantec recently added a woman to their board. They also entered their contest by their model practice, which happens to be, so we have 7 principles. We have one principle that's our 5th principle, and it's business, supply chains, and marketing practices. Basically, we ask companies to share what they know, what they're doing in these areas. And theirs was a marketing practice. So I thought it would be interesting to share that one with you today. They've created something called the Gender Equity Image Project. And what they do is, this is an audit. They have gone through and looked at all of their internal, external videos, brochures, websites, all their different types of imagery to analyze, do they represent the diverse workforce that they are, and community that they're trying to sell their products to? Do they have, we know they have men. Do they also have women? Do they also have diversity? And then they analyzed, in looking at all of these products, how many of each, what percentage was this? And at the end of the audit, they set goals for each of these. They set a 5% goal to improve the percentage of diversity in each of these, and particularly in women. So that is their model practice, which we will be able to share with others. And we're hoping many of you can share your practices with us, and that way we can all learn. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple things you didn't mention that I know will get the attention of the people in this room. First of all, when you announced the challenge, I did some research and found what ad agencies would qualify to be part of this, because you have to have a San Francisco office and at least
A Bay Area
presence and at least 1,000 employees.
1,000 employees, yes.
So I researched which agencies met that, and I wrote a blog post about it on the 3%. So go, I'll tweet it out. If your agency is listed there, this is an amazing way to get PR. You also didn't mention that, the White House is interested in this project. So tell us about that, because that...
Yeah, so we're looking for those right away. So if you have one, please, we're looking for them forever, so you can enter anytime. But we are doing a forum in January, and yes, the White House Council on Women and Girls is going to be there to present with us basically some of the best model practices that we get between now and the next month or so that we can showcase these and share them, and others can learn. And we will be doing this kind of forum every year. And again, the goal is that other cities, other counties, other states, potentially nationally, maybe even internationally, we can all start projects like this. So by sharing these, people say we don't know what to do. We don't know where to find those women that could be on the board. Well, some people have figured it out. So if we can share those practices and really implement them in our own companies, we can change the world.
Absolutely, and one of the things that is interesting, and there's so much overlap here, as everyone's talking, there's so many ways that I've intersected with them and vice versa, but misrepresentation, which is here today, we have done 3 what we call advertising salons in partnership. 11 was actually the founding agency that facilitated that. The first one was the day before last year's 3% conference, because we knew we had so much talent in the city of San Francisco. But the purpose of those ad salons was to create a dialogue around why the problems persist and how women are portrayed in advertising, and what we can do as an industry to change that. And what Symantec has done is very in keeping with something that we've raised as a potential action item through these ad salons, which is, if you guys think about every project that comes through our agencies, it all starts with a creative brief. And the creative brief says, what are we trying to accomplish? And what are the deliverables? And it has all the facts, but nowhere on the creative brief does it state what you are kind of pledging as an agency or brand to do in the creation of that work. It's kind of right at that moment of inception. So what happens is we create work that we put out in the marketplace that then misrepresentation has to, their hashtag not buying it gets used, or there's something that we've missed. And so I said, why don't we remind at the kickoff meeting when everyone's together in the spirit of creation of what we're going to pledge to do, so that if you come back with a campaign where women are either entirely absent or shown in a way that is off-putting, it's just as off-brand as if we use the wrong font. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is to create something that agencies can adapt to put as an evergreen portion of their creative brief. And Symantec basically beat their agency to the mat by saying, you know what, we're going to amend our graphic standards and say, think about all the vendors they work with. So you're telling them, here are our approved colors, here's how our logo lockup looks. And oh, by the way, here's how we expect diversity to be showcased. That's so powerful. And so I just love how that kind of feeds into something we're doing with misrepresentation. Okay, so I will tweet out again that list of agencies. If you're on it, please look into it at least. It's an amazing way to get some goodwill for your agency, to recruit, to be able to talk about being mentioned in this challenge. Okay, we're going to now move on to Cami MacArthur, who is a creative director at Swirl and who I worked with many, many, many years ago. You're a writer as well, right?
Yes.
The writers never work together.
Right.
It's so, I always say if you want to know who's a great art director, ask a writer, because they partner together, kind of like nurses and doctors. But always had a lot of admiration for Cami, although we never partnered together. And Cami spoke at last year's 3% conference on a panel about mentorship. And you had a big aha takeaway, and you started something big. So I would love for you to share that.
Sure. It's interesting listening to Cindy, because she was talking about how advertising has been done through the male gaze. And mentorship has also been done through the male gaze. 97% of our creative mentors are men. And so if we're going to be redesigning an industry, we really need to look at including women role models and female advice. It's very easy for a man to teach you how to do great advertising. It's a little more difficult for a man to really help you understand what it means to be a woman in advertising and how to navigate that. Though they try. So it's funny, because I was speaking on mentorship last year, and my big takeaway was like, I haven't had a ton of female creative director mentors. I worked in Seattle with an office of men who had stay-at-home wives. And so when I got pregnant and had my child, I couldn't really go to them and say, what do I do? How do I take my kid on a 3-month shoot? What happens if I have to leave during a pitch? These were really big questions for me. And to be honest, I think I might have dropped out if I had the opportunity at that point. I didn't. But how wonderful would it have been if I could access other women who've been in my position? Someone in San Francisco, someone in New York, someone in London. And if they made themselves available and said, you know what, I've been through the same thing, here's what you do, here's the way you gotta approach HR, it would have been invaluable. So my big aha was that it's not enough to have internal mentorship. I have 3 ladies who I work with at Swirl here, and that's great. We work together on a daily basis. I love them. I want to see them rise up to be creative directors. But what if they have a problem with me? Who do they go to? Yeah. And so this would give them the opportunity to, they need an opportunity to access a broader panel of mentors. So I came up with this idea called The Mentory, and it made perfect sense for it to be an online place where women could convene. I could say, hi, I'm Cami. I can talk to you about negotiating salary. I can talk to you about work-life balance. I can talk to you about sexual harassment, whatever it is. I have a list of things that I feel that I can talk to people about and advise on. And so someone can come to the site and choose me or choose someone else based on the situation they're in. They would have a huge panel of top advertising professionals in the country to go to get them through whatever situation, help them define their career path, whatever it is. And the site is actually built. I mean, it's wireframed out, it's designed, it's totally done. And I had a wonderful team in Australia who was going to build it, and then they got the Nike account. And so I guess it's sort of like a startup, and I guess every startup has these hiccups. So I'm kind of looking for my next partner. But first things first, at least in San Francisco, we're going to take it offline. and start just, in the way they're saying, like, just do it, just start going and developing that community and developing those relationships. And I will get that site built, though. So if anyone wants to partner with me, give me a shout.
So kind of the Eric Ries lean startup model, you build the
Yes.
MVP, the minimally
That's right.
viable product, and you iterate. And so that's, I think, where
Yes.
you are. How can the people in this room potentially support you to get unstuck from where you are? Do you need resources?
Yes, I think with anything, it's time, money, resources.
Yep.
We have the idea baked. I sort of made the Maserati of the idea, and now I need to kind of really make it more like a motorcycle, so to get it going.
Yes.
So I need a technical genius to just to talk to, and
Right.
that's probably my biggest thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Cammie shared the wireframes at the last ad salon, and they're really beautiful and usable. And you see it, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Why has
yeah.
that's been missing?
It's funny because I said to Kat, this seems kind of obvious. Why hasn't anyone done this? And she said, it is time, and it's just a matter of time, resources, money. And I think I came up with this idea in January, and it's taken this long, just to, get to where I am. But that's okay. That's cool.
Right. I remember that conversation
Yeah.
because I had the same, like when I started to think about creating the 3% conference, I was like, everyone's like, that's such a good idea. And I was like, why has no one done this? And I had this aha moment one day when I was driving where I was like, no one has time, especially
Yeah.
if you work in advertising, and the amount of time to mobilize an entire community.
That's right.
It's unbelievable. So I salute Cammie for being a full-time working mother and having gotten this far, and anything we can do to support you. If there are people in this audience that are that tech genius or can offer support, please reach out, because that's a needed product and service. So what I love about this is there's such a different flavor from everybody about where their inspiration struck and what they did with it, but all of it within 12 months, which I think, again, back to the micro actions, don't underestimate what you can do by doing something. So with that, we have about 11 minutes left. I would love to take questions because there's so much, interesting fodder here for dialogue. So we have microphones set up. You can just go and stand at the microphone and we'll ping between them for Q&A. So I see somebody getting up. That's awesome. I hope she's not going to the bathroom. And it's Shelley Strand.
Hello.
Okay.
I can't really see you behind the podium, but I wanted to give a shout out to Heidi because I know you and I've worked with you before, and I know that you are a co-working mom, and I really, just for the industry and for all of us, appreciate that you're doing this re-immersion program. I think it's incredibly valuable because as we re-enter the workforce, we've all felt like, oh God, am I relevant, and all that kind of thing. I'm curious, how do you find, are you using this as a recruiting practice to find women to come into the agency, or are you doing this more as an industry program?
More as an industry program. I just thought that we were losing such valuable talent, and there was a way that we didn't have to lose it. So that was definitely the inspiration for it. I'm really looking forward to the pilot program we're going to launch this spring. We're still ironing out some of the details, but it's going to be a pretty rapid, condensed, I keep saying crash course or boot camp. I don't know what we're ultimately going to call it, but I think the test run is going to shed some light on really where it's going to go. Thanks, Shelley.
And I love the fact that so many people get stopped in their idea generation because they think, well, I can only do this and I don't know that. And I heard someone use a term once, everything else is figure-outable. And you figured out that Miami Ad School understands how to run a school.
Right.
And you understand what the needs are and who the people are. So partnerships are really powerful. So if you get caught in a place where you're like, but I can't do it all, you don't have to. You just have to find the people that can complement you and make it a reality.
Right. And for me, that happened far before I reached out to the Miami Ad School. I had what I call a half-baked idea, and I served it up to our creative department, our strategy department, our female associate partners, and then to our executive team and board of directors. And it seems like with each pass, it just got better and better and more fine-tuned. And I think that's why when we did finally get it in front of the Miami Ad School, they reacted like that and said they were in.
Yep, exactly. Perfect. All right, question.
Hey, this is a question for you, Kat. How do you measure how many female creative directors there are out there, and how will you know next year if the number has gone up?
So a lot of people ask that, especially press, when they're about to write an article. The 3% number comes from a dissertation that was done by a graduate student who was frustrated that there weren't numbers. The Bureau of Labor Statistics does job title, but not gender with job title. So they know how many art directors there are in the world, but not how many female art directors. So this graduate student studied communication arts over 3 decades and painstakingly counted and checked the gender of the award-winning teams. Now, from a research perspective, that's the award-winning teams, which might be less favorable to women. But that's all we got, folks, in terms of measuring. So one of the things we're doing is the last time that study was done was 2008, so 5 years ago. And in those 5 years, CA has introduced an interactive annual. So all of a sudden, there's kind of a digital space for women to play in. And so we're recreating her study, using that to see, does that help the number? But really, what I said in my opening remarks about where I feel the 3% movement needs to go is around research as well, because agencies either don't have the metrics or they have them and they're so afraid to share them and be taken to the mat for how bad it is. But until there's some kind of way to measure this issue, how do we know that the 3% conference movement is working? And some people say to me, well, isn't that unmotivating to you as the founder of this? Not at all, because I feel like when I see what Ignacio's done and what everyone's doing here, when I see the Clio Awards feel the heat of our community and change their pledge for next year, I know that number will change when the things that keep that number where it is change. So it's a great question. Thanks.
So I may be seeding the audience a little bit. I work with Heidi at 11, but I'm so proud of what she's done in the last year, and to the point about making small changes very quickly. Can you speak a little bit about the change in our leadership, especially the mindset with our senior leaders, AKA white guys? We've made some pretty significant strides. So
we have. Since the last conference, we have added another layer into 11's leadership, which has really completed the management team of 11. And of that new layer, 70% are women. And so that's a big deal for us.
Whoa.
And isn't there like a profit sharing element to that as well? I hope.
Yeah,
Yes?
There can be, yes.
Okay, okay.
wanna be safe.
I do agree that Heidi is a force that has made this happen within 11. I also wanted to acknowledge Courtney. I don't know if he's here
Yes.
today.
Of course.
Are you here,
Yes.
Courtney? Way in the back. Anyway, Courtney was on a panel last year called Guys Who Get It, and I received so many compliments about him, like he's my child, but so many people commented about how incredibly evolved Courtney was, and so I think you need leadership, and you need Courtney and Heidi, and you guys have it all. So
We're really lucky. I laugh because, and thankfully I was just sharing this with Courtney within the last week. It seems like I get the comment a couple times a week now. Heidi, you are so lucky to work with and for a man who's so evolved, who's so sensitive. And of course he is, and I've worked with him for a long time, but I always tell him part of me just wants to say, yeah, come on.
awesome. Okay, we have a few more minutes. Did you want to say
Want to
something?
add to that? So what she talked about, leadership, is I've done a lot of research on this. The one thing that really makes a difference in this area is when your top leadership, i.e. your CEO or your board, makes it a priority. And with the Symantec, we have a quote from the CEO basically saying that diversity and women is a critical piece of making their company whole, and they are doing it. And so I think it speaks a lot to that alone will make a huge difference if it's coming from the top.
Yep. Question.
Hey, Kat. I was
Barbara
wondering- So great to be here. So fired up already. You mentioned you're going to London next
Yes.
year, and I'm wondering whether the situation is similar there, as bad, worse, better. And the other thing is, in the rest of Europe and in the East, in other cultures where advertising businesses are younger and the culture is younger, whether it's a better mix of genders or it's the sort of same model that they modeled on America.
Right. Last year we had Jean Grow here, who's a PhD who has studied women in advertising all over the world. And she gave a presentation called Our Sisters Overseas. And I actually did a series of interviews that were shown with CDs in Mumbai and London and all over the world. And the sad thing is, no, it's not better. In fact, it can even be worse if you can imagine it. And I had an interesting conversation last night with Jeff Halter. I don't know if he's here today. Yeah, you're here. I mentioned that the one country that I heard actually seemed to be a little better was Australia, which seemed kind of curious to me. And then Jeffrey shared that they had a mandate by the government about leadership and again, transparency. They had to report on it. And so until we have to, as an industry, report on how bad things are, like shame is a very powerful motivator. And I think it's missing from our industry. And sadly, we might need to turn up the shame dial a little. But London, a lot of people have reached out and heard about our movement and said, we want you to come. And Advertising Week has just expanded their offering. I was there in New York a few weeks ago, and they're going into London. So I think it'd be interesting to kind of plug, again, partnerships. Me going to London by myself, not doable. Me going to London with Advertising Week as a partnership, doable. So that's the goal, is to somehow bring our programming to that fair city. Yeah, we have 2 more minutes. Question, Marty Barletta.
Hi. Your conference and your movement focuses on the creative elements of the agency, and I think that's absolutely right, because creative directors are the heroes of the agency, and also you are making a very visible impact with your work and the work that you bring. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are on involving the account side of the agency, because usually the account side is much more female. The last number I heard was from a long time ago, but 60, in general, not leadership, but in general, 65% of creative departments are male, whereas on the account side, 65% of account departments are female. And you're talking a lot about partnership, and I think that when I was working in the agency world, I worked with a lot of creative directors, and one of them, many were women. And I was always praising her work in front of, and it's peer mentorship, to pick up on Cammie's point. And she surprised me when she said, boy, I always thought of mentorship as being sort of to junior people. I never really thought of peer mentorship before. But you already have more women, probably, I suspect, in leadership on the account side, and they can help facilitate this movement, partnering with it. And I just wondered what your thoughts are on, if there are, or if you think that would diffuse the movement.
We absolutely agree, and as Cindy said, everything we're hearing today relates to every single industry. In fact, a lot of people, I think, are here from the tech world also. Anywhere where female leadership is stalled in single digits can benefit from our movement. I think the reason that we chose the 3% conference kind of point in is that if you look at advertising, it's the most pronounced in our department. So yes, you're right that media and account planning and all of it, strategy, there are sisters and brothers, and they absolutely are part of this crusade, but it's most pronounced in the creative portion of the agency. So that's where and that's also where I came from and what motivated me and outraged me. So that's kind of the genesis of it, but you're absolutely right that it's now broken open and said, hey, agencies, if we're going to redesign our business, it's not going to be just the creative department redesigning the business, because we interact with all those other departments. So everybody is welcome into shaping change.
I actually wasn't thinking of it as welcome so much as a leverage point, because in media and account work, there tend to be more women in more senior positions than there is in the creative world, and those women can help push your movement forward. Obviously, those departments need help too, but they tend to be better developed. So
I agree. Thank you for that comment. 45 seconds, somebody's coming to the microphone? Yes.
Hi, I have one question, which is a bit of a micro action. slash a turn up of the shame dial, perhaps.
Yes.
For Ignacio, I recently was at the Miami Ad School talking about diversity and how we really stereotype ourselves as an industry. There's one look for art directors, there's one look for creative directors, and it tends to be bald, and diversity is in the hairline, really. And then I looked at the Art Directors Club advertising, and I realized they were these Dilbert-like cartoons where it shows 6 people in an advertising agency setting. Out of the 8 ads I found, only one showed a woman, and she was nagging a dude about a timesheet. So I thought, it was an example that I took in to talk to them about diversity, in the sense of like the normative in that was male, the normative in that was white, and the role that women were playing, they were actually considered, and sadly they were considered as the mentor or the hall monitor. So I just wanted to know if maybe next year someone here or our agency or another agency that that has a little bit of free time could help you revamp that advertising to perhaps reflect something a little more inclusive.
You're talking about the cartoon?
Yes.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just an opportunity to rebrand those advertising pieces.
Yeah, that was done by that was a volunteer creative director that did that cartoon. It was a white guy.
All right, so then we need to volunteer to make it different.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
volunteer, women, hop in. And you know what? We talked about this very openly. I get taken to the mat sometimes. Anytime you raise a very sensitive issue, there are going to be times you fail. And we have, I think, 20% of our speakers are non-white speakers. And I had to ask the rookie question of, is that enough? I don't know. And so I think we're all trying to figure out what the right balance is. But it's, she's raising a point of something she noticed. And
yeah, and that was for an event to get all the creative directors together for dinner, which we did. We even did one last night, and we talk about involving women and inviting women of all levels. So I don't know what to tell you.
All right, thank you very much. We're a little bit over. Thank you all. Okay, thank you. You did great.